And with being out of town over the weekend, obviously I didn't get a chance to do anything then. So I feel like I haven't connected with some of you that I usually see every couple of days online, see in quotes. But anyway, I hope that things are going well for you. I hope you've had a great week between the last time I jumped on and right now. But I just wanted to share something with you out of my own daily reading. Right now, in the Gospels, I read through the Gospels just continuously. Whatever else I'm reading in Scripture, I'm always reading through the Gospels. Excuse me. And I am in Luke chapter 5. And Luke chapter 5 comes out of this amazing, well, in Luke 2, of course, you have the birth of Christ. And Luke 3, you have the baptism of Jesus. In Luke 4, you've got the temptation in the wilderness and his first miracles and things like that. Good morning, Robin. Good morning, Roxanne. Hi, Susan. Good to again see all you everybody. But you get to chapter 5, and it starts with a miracle, and then it leads immediately into the calling of some of the disciples. And what really struck me was this that I wanted to share with you. So in Luke chapter 5, Jesus is teaching the people. People are flocking to him to hear his words. And this is, hi, Carol. Good to have you on. And this is that time when they're pressing in so much that he's right at the lake shore. And so he asks Peter, he says, hey, can I borrow your boat? Can you push out a little ways away so I won't get trampled and everybody can hear me better? So Peter says yes. So he gets in and he does his sermon. When he finishes his sermon, he says, now look, I want you guys to row back out into the deep water, and I want you to cast your nets down. And if you do that, you're going to have a great catch. When you read that, that's in verse 4. Don't blitz past that too fast. Peter, of course, makes the point. He goes, look, we've just come back from fishing all night and we didn't catch a thing. So Peter and these other guys, they are meeting Jesus at a moment of great frustration. They've done what they knew to do, and it had been totally fruitless. And of course, I know you know this, but this wasn't pleasure fishing. This was fishing for a living. This was fishing to pay their taxes and stay out of jail and feed their family and all those kinds of things. So they'd done everything they knew to do, and it was fruitless. So on top of that, they had just worked all night. Now, working all day is bad enough, but working all night, my goodness, I'm so glad I've never had to actually work a true night shift. I know maybe some of you have, but that'd be so tough. I know my son many times over the last few years has been on a night shift. That's a tough thing, to work all night long, and then just about the time you're ready to pack it in and go catch some Z's, somebody says, hey, now get this, row back out to the deep water. If you look at what's going on in this story, these guys were rinsing their nets. Cleaning the nets is a really important part of this job. I've read up on it. And so they're already ready to pack everything away. He's like, no, I want you to row back out. So now you got to row again. Now remember, if you row out, you got to row back. So I want you to do all this work again that you just did, and all the cleaning of the nets you just did. Guess what? You're going to get all those dirty again too, and you're going to get to do all that again as well. In other words, this was not an attractive invitation at all. This was, oof. And then on top of that, Peter and these guys, they're fishermen. They know what they're talking about. Jesus is a builder. He's a carpenter. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But Peter says this, in verse 5, he says, but if you insist, kind of reminds me of the response that guys give their wives so often, and I'm so guilty of it. Well, no, honey, I don't really want to do that, what you're suggesting, but if that's really what you want, I guess we'll do it. And we say that hoping that they'll say, okay, don't worry about it. It's no big deal. And we go, ooh, good, got out of that one. But he says, if you insist, we'll go out and let our nets down again, because he actually says this, we'll go out again and let our nets down because of your word. And Jesus doesn't back up. Now, it's interesting that Peter says, I'll do this because of your word. Good morning, Judy. I'll do this because of your word. Since you said it and you didn't back away from it, I'll do it. And the very next verse is when they pulled up their nets, they were shocked to see a huge catch of fish. So much their nets were ready to burst. They had to actually call over their partners to bring their boat, and they filled both boats with so much that the boats started to sink. Now, some scientists have done some figuring on this based on the kinds of boats they used back then. And they said that this would have been something along the line of a ton of fish that they caught, enough to sink two boats. That would have been normally 2 good weeks of fishing that they did in one cast. And Simon Peter, of course, sees this and is blown away. And that's when Jesus says to him, Simon, I'm going to make you a fisher of men. And verse 11, the story ends. After they finally got their boats to the shore, they left everything behind and followed Jesus. This is the part that I really wanted to impress on you. There are those times when you have done everything you know to do, and it just hasn't brought any fruitfulness. What you've needed so desperately just hasn't been found. And you're shot. And Jesus comes along and he says, let's do it again. And everything inside you is like, I don't want to do it again. I know this isn't going to work. I know that trying a little more in my marriage, or contending for my healing, or contending for breakthrough in my finances, or contending for breakthrough in my depression or discouragement, or praying for that lost child or lost spouse or lost friend, or it just isn't working. Nothing, whatever the situation is, it just feels like nothing's working. And Jesus says, let's do it again. Let's do it again. And everything in you doesn't want to do it, but you, like Peter, you say, okay, I'll do it because of your word. Because Jesus had said, if you'll do this, you'll have a great catch. And though everything in our experience and all of our emotional and maybe even physical weariness is saying it's not worth the effort, because of his word, we go and do what he has told us to do one more time. And I love it that it was this that caused them to follow Jesus. And isn't it true that when you see Jesus suddenly, for reasons that only he has, timing that only he understands, when you see him suddenly bring fruitfulness to the endeavors that you have repeated over and over and over again, seemingly to no avail, isn't it true that in those moments, you just are freshly ready to follow him wherever he'll take you, wherever he wants you to go? If we don't obey because of his word, we won't have those experiences. And the simple fact of the matter is that in time, we won't follow Jesus. I don't mean we'll turn away from him and say, you're not my Lord, I don't want you. No. But we won't follow him. We won't see what he's up to. We won't understand what he's about. And this is the last thing I'll say. So they followed him, and you go into verse 12, and the very first experience that Peter and the boys have with Jesus after following him is they run into a leper. This is, in our culture today, there's not much that compares to that. It is what back in the early 80s, I know many of you would remember when you found out that someone had an AIDS diagnosis, you were just like, oh no, because it was just over for them. You felt like, or nowadays when we hear certain kinds of cancer, you feel like, oh no, it's over. That's what this was in this day. And Jesus reaches out and touches him, which you were not supposed to do. You're supposed to run from lepers. And he says, I want to heal you. You'll be healed. And instantly, the Bible says he was covered. You can read it yourself in verse 12. He was covered with leprous sores. And in verse 13, instantly the leprous sores went away and his skin became smooth. You know how come Peter got to see that? Because Peter did something that he had done over and over and over again, and it had brought no fruitfulness. But Jesus said, I want you to do it again. And because of Jesus' word, Peter does all the hard work again, and this time he sees a miracle. And on the faith that rose up in him, he said, okay, Jesus, I'll follow you. And the next thing he sees is an even greater miracle. Jesus wants to lead you into experiences where you see his healing power, his grace, the wonderful love that was on display when he reached out and touched a man that nobody had touched in years. He wants you to experience that. But those experiences are almost always on the other side of doing the hard, kind of drudgery parts of obedience when God says do it. I'm in the middle of some of that myself right now. Going back and kind of like Isaac, redigging some wells and say, oh, I've done all this before. Yeah, but God's calling and saying, do it again. Go back and do it again, because you're going to have something there. Something's going to happen in my timing for you, and it's going to strengthen you. And on the other side of that obedience, that hard obedience, you're going to see a fresh revelation of my grace, my love, and my power to heal and save. I hope that encourages you this morning. I really do. And looking forward to getting with you again soon. Have a wonderful rest of the day, everybody. Love you.